Patrick, it's shocking what I am seeing. I'm talking to a couple thousand entrepreneurs every year in multiple countries. And I ask them how much percentage every month is your savings rate that you put into assets. And they go, but Simon, it depends. I don't know my monthly income. You don't know your monthly income?
Simon Severino, thanks for joining me on the Everyday Millionaire podcast. Nice to have you.
Hello, thanks for having me.
So, Simon, the bios on my guests are always a little bit, thin, I think. I think we always love to hear from the guest as answer to the question of when somebody asks Simon, what do you do, Simon? What's your answer to that question?
I double revenue of entrepreneurs. That's my superpower.
Your superpower is the ability to help entrepreneurs double revenue. That's a pretty big superpower. So let's talk about that. So when it comes to doubling the revenue of your clients, first off, who are your clients? I mean, entrepreneurs in general? Are you into a specific industry? How does that work for you?
Entrepreneurs who have an online business, even mostly remote team, and have the challenge of having to sell online via Zoom, Teams, Google, a high ticket offer. High ticket means it's above $10,000. So there is a certain complexity, there is a risk involved, and you have to really trust that person. And you want to know, why should I buy from you? Why should I trust you? Does this really work for me? So it's a complex sales situation, and it's a high ticket online sales situation. Those are the business owners that we pick for a 90 days strategy sprint. And in 90 days, we help them improve three things by 25% each. I guess we will go deep into all of this. And when we improve those three pieces by 25%, they effectively increase revenue by 99%. That's why we say we double your revenue in 90 days.
So that's an interesting concept. Now, would you consider yourself, in terms of that description, are you, I don't want to say, are you experts in marketing? What is your expertise? When you're supporting somebody in that goal, you're coaching them to do that. So there's some expertise in coaching and what goes along with supporting an entrepreneur and actually taking action and making those kinds of moves. So how do you consider yourself? Do you consider yourself expertise in marketing, or what goes beyond that side of it, Simon?
We're business coaches. So our expertise is really marketing strategy, sales strategy, because it's about business growth. And so you have to think, my mentor would say, it's about the geometry of the business, it's about the business of the business. And then we drill deep into their spreadsheets, into their world, into their emails, and improve each part with them. There is one element which is strategy, which means, hey guys, what's the plan of attack? In which business are you? Where do you want to play? Where do you want to win? What's your plan of attack? Do you have one? Do we have to refine it? And then it's the actual execution.
Mm-hmm.
Month
So
one is
yeah,
around
go ahead.
positioning. Month two is around increasing win rates. Month three is around sales velocity. So positioning means you're currently being compared with other options that they have. And mostly, you don't want to be compared with that part because it's actually a false comparison. So how can you increase the perceived value by having them compare you with the right thing? That is called positioning. Expressing in a clear way who you are here to serve and how you help them accomplish whatever you help them accomplish. When we refine the positioning, we find that you can increase your price now by 25% without losing clients, sometimes even more. But on average, it's 25% that can be charged more for services or offers. And many of our businesses are service businesses, like consultants, marketeers, IT agencies, design agencies. When you increase by 25% the price without losing the clients, that now we have achieved the first milestone of the sprint.
So when you start to look at, when you talk about products or services over 10,000, I'm assuming mostly service, or are you also working with entrepreneurs who are selling products? So can you give us an example of, somebody who might call you and say, I need some help. I've got this online business. We're trying to sell this. Is there a this that's more common than others? Is it a service? Is it a product? Where do you kind of enter the conversation?
Typically, it's professional services. So it's a team that does consulting or advisory or financial
Hmm.
advisory. Sometimes it's
Hmm.
a product. So recently, it was a team that invented a machine that can detect just by sound, it can detect which part of a process will break next. So that's a machine, and they wanted to sell this machine. They were in a Series A to enterprises, but they are great at building machines. They have never learned the art of the complex B2B sales. How do I get even a conversation going with the head of logistics at Boeing? They didn't know how to do that. So
Hmm.
how do you start the list? How do you get them on the phone? Do you get them on Zoom? Simon, how do I do that? So this is how we started with these guys who invented the machine, and then also there is software teams that we help if it's a B2B software. So a B2B software is, for example, you have built a CRM solution for enterprises. Those people have the same challenge. How do I get a meeting with the head of Abbott, and how do I structure that meeting or that series of meetings so that I land the deal?
So when you talk about kind of what people are comparing you to, or competing, I mean, I think about the world of marketing, and so much of it is driven by social media platforms. And you're also competing with the many distractions out there as well. So when you think about, and this is a question, I guess, that I'm trying to get clear on what the question is, but if you're working with somebody in that instance where they had this kind of unique product, when you think about how do you get attention on that, like, if, especially given that somebody who uses it doesn't even know it exists, or would be interested in using it, I should say, doesn't even know exists. So that becomes a marketing conversation. And are you then kind of looking at how do we grab attention in a social media world, or where are you entering the conversation with an organization like you just described?
Yes, in those 90 days, the client will pick one social media channel that they feel that's fun for them to
Mhm.
intensely work on, because we will play on that every day for those 90 days, and we will also help them. We will give them into amplifier groups, so other 20 clients that have a similar target group with adjacent offers, and they will all keep each other accountable and have fun posting together, and they will say, hey Bob, why didn't you post yesterday? I missed you. So because not everybody loves marketing, so our clients, they're great at what they do, but if they're not a marketing agency, they don't love marketing. So we help them enjoy it by putting them together with other people. Now it becomes a collective endeavor, and it's much more fun. So yes, they will pick their social media. Most of our clients, they pick LinkedIn because they are in
Yeah,
the B2B field.
yeah, the
Um,
B2B field, yeah. I was going to ask you that. LinkedIn seems to be the best platform for that B2B. I'm finding that in my own experience and with our own marketing team, that Meta is just a beast pain in the ass to work with. Are you finding the same thing with Meta? By the way, and not the trash talk Meta, but it's awful. I just, the platform drives me crazy. I'm glad that I have a team that kind of has the patience for it. I certainly wouldn't, but just out of curiosity, what's your experience with Meta? Am I the only one that's facing these Meta challenges, or is it common?
it's common, yes. We
Yeah,
pick we pick LinkedIn for these reasons, and then some of our clients, they also like to add either YouTube, because some of our clients, they are big YouTubers in the first place. So we start with
sure.
YouTube, but then we retarget on LinkedIn. And some of our clients, they love X. I also love X. I love YouTube and X too. But when we started, and in a sprint, you focus on one and you optimize that until it scales. So
Mm.
we focus on one, and most people pick LinkedIn nowadays.
Now, in a time where we see, and I don't know what it's like in Austria, and I know that you're global in scope for what you do, but when you consider what's going on economically, are you experiencing a time right now where it's harder, even in a B2B format, to get people to buy product, look at product? It seems, and I'm asking you this question, is we're noticing that businesses and individuals seem to be pulling back. They're not as willing to part with money these days. Uh, and these are all cycles that, economies go through. What are you noticing out there?
There is a twilight zone right now. Cheap products are harder to sell, expensive products are easier to sell. And that
Interesting.
mirrors our societal gap. People without assets living paycheck to paycheck, they're basically getting poor. The middle class is disappearing, and most of the middle class is just becoming poor, and because of inflation and because they don't invest in assets and they don't
Hmm.
hold them long enough, and their savings rate is not high enough. And then the other part, that little part that has assets like real estate and stocks, uh, they're getting richer and richer every day, and it's easier to sell to them because if you look at Hermes, for example, they had absolutely no dip, but Louis Vuitton had, because Louis Vuitton has also some cheap products like drinks, and that had a dip. If you look at the pool corporation, it's really split in half. The cheap pools are have a pipeline that's dry. They're not selling the cheap pools this year. So lower income families don't pull pools from them, but the higher end pools have the same pipeline as always. Nothing changed for the higher end, for the expensive pools, swimming pools in your garden, but the cheap ones, nobody's buying them.
So, what you're noticing and what you're suggesting here for anybody listening that is, an entrepreneur and maybe struggling with some sales is that going through these economic times, you have to consider that who's being most impacted, and most impacted is middle class. Certainly, when you get into that mid or lower middle class and below that margin, they're being hit the hardest with increased interest rates, with increased cost of living, whether it be food and fuel or rent or mortgage payments. So disposable income is being impacted. And that's not just on a B2C scenario. I could be a B2B. So an entrepreneur, maybe it's a solopreneur or a kind of a 2 or 3 man army, is struggling with, cash flow, liquidity. And so those individuals, as much as they may want to enter into a conversation with, whatever level of product or service you're providing, they just don't have the liquidity to do it. So you're suggesting, and what you're noticing is that you got to play into that bigger game, into those individuals or those businesses that are beyond that. So they're maybe, well, obviously they're more lucrative, or they have better cash flow, they have better liquidity, they have not been impacted to the same degree. So am I hearing what you're saying? So really, that guidance there is focus on a new market. Back to your point, you're in this transition twilight zone, if you will, of who the buyers are. Is that an accurate kind of statement in this
Yeah,
case?
low ticket pipelines are drying up, high ticket pipelines are fine.
Hmm.
So move
Now,
to high ticket.
now, do you is this because you're in the industry or you're doing what you're doing that you see this, or is there actual, are you seeing data out there that's supporting what you're just talking about? Like, I agree with you, by the way. I'm noticing that as well. I'm only noticing it because I've got more than one business, and we're seeing where people are challenged in a lower ticket item, those individuals who would actually buy a lower ticket item are kind of going, no, I'm out. Uh, but do you actually have data that supports it anywhere, or is it just what you've got going on with experience, Simon?
Yes, we have data. We have 24 countries where we have hundreds of sprints running. So that's one internal data. And then
Yeah.
there is external data. If you listen, you can listen to the Pool Corporation's earnings call, the most recent ones, where the CEO explains exactly how the the lower cost pools is really hard to sell, and they have a dip there. But the higher
Yeah.
end pools are untouched, like easy to sell.
Understood. So when you say higher, are you saying over $5,000 product, over $10,000 product? I know you talked about a $10,000 product. Is 5,000 considered a lower, or is it kind of on the edge? Where are you on that price points? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, for most online businesses, everything that's below 10,000 is a low ticket in our definition, and above 10,000 is a high ticket. So if
Hmm.
it's advisory, consulting, everything that's a professional service is a high ticket offer, because
Got
over
it.
a year, people will pay more than 10,000 per month in your services.
Yeah.
And the important metric is always the lifetime value annualized over a year. So professional services, um, they have a better situation right now for two reasons. They are capital light, so they have less downside risk, and also they are higher margin. So that if they had a good savings rate, we should probably also talk about savings rates. If they saved personally above 15% or ideally above 30% every month and have built assets, they're fine.
So can you walk me through a scenario? Give me an example of that, Simon.
Sure, a marketing agency. Pre-sprint marketing agencies, we see having a net profit margin around 30%, 40%. And we go, guys, what are you doing? You don't have any machinery, right? Where is your profit going? So we optimize month one, month two, month three. We optimize the price that they can charge. We optimize the win rate. We optimize sales velocity and delivery. They now have a net profit margin in the 80s, let's say 85, 86% of net profits. Now, typically, these marketing agencies are owned by one or two people. So those people make net profits every year. And now you divide those agency owners into the one that actually build wealth over time. They understand that it's important to have a savings rate above 15% every month and to invest that into assets, real estate, stocks, digital assets. And those who do that, even if they're doing, let's say, 100,000 or 200,000 per year in net income, personal income, they will be soon millionaires. It takes 10 years, 12 years, 15 years, 20 years, but they will have over a million in net worth. And then there are others who are making 300,000, 250,000, 400,000 in net income per year, but they don't reinvest it in assets. And those people will either not get past a million net worth ever, or it will take them very, very long.
So when you look at the kind of assets that you consider, and especially given what's going on today, do you have a basket of assets that you're looking at? Is it real estate? Is it Bitcoin? Is it precious metals? Is it stocks? Do you get into that space of saying, okay, here's a place to allocate capital to?
Yes. So after a 90-day sprint, we have optimized their sales. And many ask, hey, Simon, but there is so much more that I want to learn, like financial freedom, delegation, hiring, etc. Do you have anything that's longer term where we can tackle also the other things? And also, I want to learn what to do with my money now that I have money, how to keep it. And so we have a mastermind for that. That's an ongoing mastermind with an annual subscription. And in there, we share also how to keep the money. And the process there is part one, design your portfolio. And that depends on your edge. What is your edge? Do you understand the specific field better than others, so you have alpha, then you will go automatically there. Um, the principles are the same for everyone, but what you choose is highly individually. So
Mm.
my personal portfolio is one third real estate, one third stocks. I pick stocks, no ETFs, and one third digital assets. And that portfolio is doing quite well. I have doubled the net asset value uh, on average every 3.8 years. And that sounds pretty fast, but it's not that hard. You just have to hit a 20% growth rate per year annualized. And it's not that hard actually, because the economy is growing slower, but the markets are on a rampage.
Yeah, given what's going on in the world, when you think about it, I think at 10%, your investment doubles. What is the math on that? Was it doubles every 10 years or something? So if you're getting 20%, then it would make sense that when you extrapolate those numbers that you're coming in at about 3.8. Is that kind of what you're basing the math
Yes,
on, Simon?
yes,
Yeah.
at 20%, it's the rule of 72. At 20%, you double every 3.8 years. And
Yeah.
that's realistic. You can do that. So I started with a little amount 12 years ago, and I shared it in both in my mastermind, but also on my YouTube channel, Simon Severino. I share my journey of going from minus 50,000 to right now, today, it's $1,080,000. And I share the exact allocations, the three thirds, and even what I'm buying and when I'm selling things. The the core philosophy is I have picked one topic, which is where I have some understanding. It's around data and around pricing power. So who owns the data and who has pricing power? And pricing power is tied to strategic advantage. It's measurable, and one part is qualitative. But that's my background, right? I'm a strategy advisor, so uh, I see I see strategic advantages uh, when I watch at markets. So I picked that lane for me, and I shared those principles. And the people in our community, they pick their lane. Some of them understand healthcare, so they will pick from healthcare. Some understand biotech. Some understand small businesses. Some go all private businesses and private equity because they understand that field better.
So when you look at what is kind of happening economically and considering that you've got this kind of view of how to separate a portfolio, one third in your case, you're suggesting, an idea is one third real estate, a third digital assets, and a third into the stock market, whatever that might look like in terms of individual companies. You're self-managed in that regard. You're not buying ETFs, and that's your particular strategy. Now, when you consider all of those strategies, are you spending a lot of time in terms of looking at economic data? So in other words, you're examining what's going on economically and making those choices. When I look at real estate, which is one of my areas of expertise, I'm always looking at the economic data that says, okay, this is a good region to invest in. This is a good strategy to use given the real estate cycle. Uh, when I look at even my stock portfolio or my digital, I invest in Bitcoin, for example. I invest in precious metals. Those are areas that I've learned a lot about over the past several years, both of which, for example, Bitcoin and or precious metals, I've been investing in for a number of years. But I'm always looking at the data. Are you wired the same way? Are you supporting your clients in learning how to look at the data that helps them make decisions?
Yes, plus also qualitative aspects. So uh, we have both fundamental analysis and technical analysis for the stocks and for the digital assets. For
Mm-hmm.
real estate, it's just location and then you hold it. That's it. I look at uh, the rentability per city and at location, of course. Must be
Right.
limited location and then rentability. So in each city, it's different what is easy to rent. In Vienna, it's 55 square meters. It's the easiest to rent. It has a 98% um, renting
Wow.
percentages.
Yep.
And so I go for small apartments in that size that are near a metro or near a hospital, near good infrastructure. So it's
Yep.
location and size that I look at. And then I hold that forever. And I don't expect great returns. That's the defensive part. And that's forever. That goes to my kids. Um, then with stocks, I have a checklist for dividend stocks that's numerical, and one that looks at strategic advantage. It's pricing power. I learned from Warren Buffett that the most important thing in a company is pricing power. Everything else is downstream from that. If you have a high pricing power, you have low cost of acquisition of a client. If you have a high pricing power, you have high margins. If you have a high pricing power, you will have the three things that I look for. I look at operating income over the 10 years. Is it growing or not? I look at return on equity over 10 years. Is it growing or not? And I look at free cash flow per share over 10 years. Is it growing or not? And then I screen 150 possible stocks from my the, investable universe, and the top 10 are my current portfolio. And the goal is to hold them as long as possible.
Hmm.
Because if you pick a good company that has good pricing power over the last 10 years, you can actually relax for the next 10 years. And we have examples, Nvidia, Bitcoin. If you pick something that's a good company, you can actually relax for 10 years. If we overtrade Bitcoin or Nvidia, it's probably not getting better. It's maybe more exciting, but the returns are probably not getting much better than just buying it and holding it. Everybody who holds Bitcoin more than 4 years is happy. Everybody who overtrades is stressed.
Well, it's an interesting point that you make, which is, I've learned over the years, and I self manage my own investment portfolio, is if I've made mistakes, it's that I've gotten in and out, even though, for example, I look at some of the companies that I've owned over the years that I got out of, and I go, I wish I would have. Now I pulled profits, so I can't complain. But having said that, I can complain and go, I left so much money on the table because I didn't ride out the highs, the lows, and just say, no, the fundamental of the business hasn't changed. They're at the effect of what's going on economically. And certainly, I've learned over the years that in many cases would have been the right time to go all in, go in even deeper. And so that takes a lot of research, because it's so important that, and maybe you would speak to it, is that how much emotional decisions are being made in, number one, chasing something, when we think about what's going on in the world today. And I think it was, is it GameStop is an example of emotional. Now I never got in on the GameStop thing, but it was a thing, right? It was like all this emotionality, everybody jumps in and a whole bunch of people make money and a whole bunch more lose because of the emotionality. It's not a data driven decision. And what you're suggesting, and I agree with, is that, pick 10 good companies, 5 good companies, whatever it is for you, and then just let it go through what it goes through and see if you believe in the model. If in fact there is a pullback, that might be the right time to jump in a little deeper. Is that a fair statement?
Yes. And this is why it's a process. Investing is a process and takes time. And this is why also I've created the 200K club, where we have a 24/7 Slack group around these things. Every Monday we come together, but 24/7 we have this Slack group, because sometimes it gets highly emotional at my 11 p.m. And so I go, guys, oh my God, earnings, Nvidia earnings tomorrow. I feel the urge to do this or that. And then we look each other deep in the eye and go, okay, back to our process. What's the process?
Yeah.
Did the fundamentals change? And so, for example, Nvidia recently, I sold too early. Typical mistake. Selling
Yep.
too early, holding
Me
it for
too.
3 years, wasn't doing anything. Then I sell it, and it went through the roof.
Yeah.
Now I feel FOMO every day. I feel FOMO,
Yeah.
but I did not. I did not give in to this urge. So when I feel FOMO, I go, okay, there is a strong emotion here. And I'm an emotional being. So I see other people making money. I go, why not me? So let me jump in. But if I missed a train, I missed a train. That's it. I don't chase stocks. That's
Mhm.
why I have the long list of 150. If they dip, I go into the next one. So I'm looking right now at completely different stocks. I'm looking at MSCI and I'm looking at Linde, which nobody's talking about, but they are highest quality, strong pricing power, 10 years of all these metrics that I told you, free cash flow per share, operating income, 10 years always up. Nobody's looking at them. So I am
Mhm.
silently accumulating those two guys
Mhm.
because I have a system and I follow my system. Right?
What were those ticker symbols again for the listener? MSCI.
MSCI, which is, there's the MSCI World, MSCI Emerging Market ETFs. This is the
Mhm.
company that collects the data. It's a data company, a software company that
Mhm.
collects those data that the indexes use. So whenever somebody buys an ETF in MSCI World or MSCI Emerging Markets,
Mhm.
MSCI gets a couple percentages.
Yep.
That's
Got it.
why it's a high quality company, because it's hard to enter that market. It's a quite uh, established market. It's not easy to become the next indexer. There are just three indexer, and they are pretty defensive. And so it's hard to enter. And independent of how the markets evolve, in a down market, they're making money because people invest passively in a down market. In a bull market, they're also making money
Mhm.
because people will always invest in ETFs and they need an index. So this is a high quality company with a high moat, a wide moat. It's always on the Goldman Sachs wide moat list. I look at that list every year to see if my guys are still in the wide moat list. That is also an indicator that they have a defensible strategic advantage, not just strategic advantage, but they can regain strategic advantage again. And the
Mhm.
other one is Linde. Linde, they create they package gases for industrial use and for healthcare. So, for example, oxygen for a hospital comes packaged. Somebody has to produce it, to put it in a package, and to sell it to the hospital and deliver to the hospital. That's Linde.
Mhm.
So
Got it.
again, in down years, they were making money because they were bringing oxygen to hospitals, and in bull markets, they make money anyways.
Beautiful. And of course, none of this, everybody, is investing advice. This is just what Simon is doing in his own portfolio. So appreciate those insights. Now, when you look at the model of your coaching entrepreneurs, and you talk about being able to take 15, I think you use the percentage of 15%, and then invest it in assets. When you look at entrepreneurs who generally either pay themselves more or they reinvest it in the business, those are decisions, I guess, that have to be made. Or are you suggesting that, listen, you are an entrepreneur, you can invest and reinvest in your business, that's great, but part of the hedge or part of your strategy has to be able to take that 15% and get it outside of the being invested in your business to own assets outside of that? Is that the kind of what I'm hearing in that model that you're laying out, Simon?
Patrick, it's shocking what I am seeing. I'm talking to a couple thousand entrepreneurs every year in multiple countries. And I ask them how much percentage every month is your savings rate that you put into assets. It can be liquid assets, illiquid assets, but assets. And they go, "But Simon, it depends. I don't know my monthly income." So you don't know your
Mm.
monthly income? So they pick a bank at the end of the month, whatever's left, that's their salary. And I'm shocked because, guys, if you're listening to this and if you don't pay yourself the first or second day of the month, your salary, um, you are not building any business, and you are also creating a very volatile, very stressful life. So, first decision, whatever the number is, pick a number. You can change that number, but pick a number and get paid on the first of the month from your company account to your personal account. You can change that number anytime, but install that system. So get paid a salary. Okay, you are now the CEO of a company. I know that you don't call yourself a CEO, you don't feel like a CEO, but hey, if you own a business, you are the CEO.
Mhm. Well, we often say you're the CEO of your life for sure. And if part of your life is a business, then you are the CEO of your business. And pay yourself first is a tough thought process for many to wrap their mind around. And yet, it's one of the most important lessons I think that anybody can learn on their entrepreneurial journey. Now, Simon, given where you are, share a little bit of your own background. So you're strategic. I think you said you're a strategic consultant or something along that line. And give me a little bit of insight into how you started your entrepreneurial journey. Were your parents entrepreneurial? How did you decide that you were going to be an entrepreneur, and when did that journey start for you?
I didn't even know that I'm an entrepreneur, but I kind of became it because I was an employee in a strategy advisory. And when you're a strategy advisor at the senior level, you have to catch your own food. So you eat what you hunt. You have to bring the clients. And so I
Hmm.
was bringing clients, but I didn't know how to do it. I was just doing it. Don't ask me. I don't know how I did it in the first years. I had no method or tactic or anything. I was just always having work. So then I go on my own and I go, all right, now I have to do this, but even more serious because now if I have a down month, I can't pay the rent. So first, okay, I have to save something. This is how I stumbled upon the savings rate. I literally Googled what should be my savings rate, and there was Fidelity saying 15%. I said, okay, let's do 15%. So 15%. And then I realized it's not even that hard. I I got it up to 36% in some months. And now I had a savings rate. So I was constantly putting something on the side. I had no financial literacy, so I just asked, "What should I do, guys?" I think it was my bookkeeper or somebody told me, "Hey, go real estate." I started with real estate. It was the right advice. So the first 10 years, I did just real estate, and it was the right thing to do because the most defensive thing when you have the least of of a clue what you're doing.
Hmm.
So it was a good advice. Then from there, I scaled my own business. And so I was the bottleneck of my business. I had to fire myself from operations. I fired myself by getting the process out of my head into a book, the Strategy Sprints book, that became the Strategy Sprints method. Now that there was a method, I could start teaching it to others. So I started teaching it. That became a certification model. And that certification became then a franchise model. So now I am not um, dependent on the business. The business is not dependent on me. I can enjoy it. I do some things like talking about the business on podcasts and writing books and scaling the business, but I'm not in the operations anymore. So now I had time to actually get more into investing. And so I started studying stocks. And then came crypto, and I started studying digital assets. And now that is a couple hours per day. I am my portfolio manager now, which I quite enjoy. It's a fun hobby to have. And it became even a YouTube channel where I'm sharing the current portfolio and why I take which decisions and how I deal with emotions coming up, because it's fascinating, right? You learn a lot about yourself on this journey. And yeah, people seem to need it because they watch it.
Now, it's interesting that you're a relatively young man. You've been on your entrepreneurial journey, but you've achieved what many entrepreneurs struggle to achieve, which is that you own a business. And for me, when I define a business, to your point, is that your business is not dependent on you day to day. So in other words, you're not selling your time, which is often what happens with entrepreneurs is they go out on their own, they start a business, but really what they're doing is they're just selling their time. And when they quit selling their time, revenue dries up. You, on the other hand, have created a business model where revenue is being driven whether you're at the helm or not. So in other words, you can step back, you can kind of slow things down and work on the business, not in the business. And that's a fundamental shift that many struggle with, in or on their entrepreneurial journey. And where did you or how did you get that lesson? Because you've got it quite early. I know for myself, I've owned businesses for 40 years and I share that story often, but it took me a long time to figure that one out. It took me a long time of being the technician in my business before I finally went, hold it. I don't really own an asset called a business. And although it was a bricks and mortar business, at the end of the day, it took me a long time to go, hold it. I've got to duplicate myself. I got to step back and say, okay, who am I going to hire to do this job? How's it going to generate revenue, et cetera, et cetera. But that took me a long time to figure it out in my world, anyways. Where did you get that lesson? Where did it show up for you?
Yes, I'm 44, and scaling the business was something that I was very deliberate about, and where I wanted to really be good at. And I studied, I had coaches, I put a lot of effort into it and resources into it. The investing part, I was more stumbling into it, and I'm still stumbling into it week by week. I'm learning something new and getting more accurate and more precise with these things, and specifically with the holding period, I'm getting better with that. Um, it is a process, and give yourself time. In our mastermind in the 200K club, every Monday we come together and we pick one of the parts. So what I help them now do is, there are active revenue streams and there are passive revenue streams, and you really want to stack multiple of both upon each other. So for example, let's say you are marketing agency and you have now sales. How can you make sales repeat sales? That's the yellow pyramid that I teach in the Monday sessions. And how on repeat sales, how can you add recurring sales? Subscriptions, paid communities. How can you put recurring sales on that?
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you have now sales, repeat sales, and recurring sales, you can relax a little bit and slow down, as you say, because it's important to have the time to think. I need a
Mm-hmm.
lot of time to think. And in my calendar, there are big blocks, 60 minutes, 90 minutes, almost every day. One of them is just for working out. That's it. And one of them is thinking time. This is where I either walk or run in nature with one big question. And the question can be, should I write my second book or not? One question, and I go out for a walk for an hour. I don't know the answer, and I don't stress myself to come up with the answer, but I hold a big question for a while, and in nature, usually. This is
You know,
important CEO work.
This is so important. And like you, in my calendar, I have blocks of time in my calendar. I call it headspace. So my team and my assistant has those, and we position them, for example, before an event. There's always at least 90 minutes, often, well, an hour, at least an hour, often 90 minutes prior to an event where it's just headspace. In other words, there's no meetings in there. There's no to-dos in there. This is just me having thinking time. And so to your point is where many entrepreneurs get stuck and they get into the doingness of it and they just literally don't give themselves time to think. But it's very hard to shift gears and you need some wins along the way.
Mhm.
It's understanding, it's like, trust me, you can do it. No, I can't trust
No,
you. I need to
no, no.
verify,
And
you
I
know?
don't trust either. I don't trust nobody.
Yeah.
So I hear you. If you go, guys, yeah, 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 it's easy for you guys, but I don't trust you. Don't trust. Build income replacement streams,
Mm-hmm.
both active ones. If you have a full pipeline plus some is recurring, now when the next month starts, there is already 50% of your goals achieved. Now you can relax. Of course, you can't relax if you're hungry. No, you shouldn't. So pipeline must be full. That's why I'm a sales coach, because that's a fundamental thing that people need. And so I'm here to serve that. And then plus you need some recurring elements. That's the active side. Now let's go to the passive side. The passive side. What about having book royalties on top, some dividend income, some capital gains, some staking income? I made $14,000 this year just from staking Solana. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, it's easier for me to relax and go for an hour of a walk if I know that there are multiple revenue streams happening, even if I do nothing. Of course, that
Mm-hmm.
helps relaxing, right? And it wouldn't be if I wake up and the pipeline is half dry. I am not relaxed either, guys. Nobody is,
Mm-hmm.
right? So let's create those multiple revenue streams, both on the active side, some of them recurring, some on the passive side, and bit by bit they compound. The magic of compounding is you think, yeah, but my $200 into stocks won't move the needle. Wrong. Everybody started with $200. Even probably Warren Buffett started with $200. And they compounded over 10 years, over 20 years.
So when you look at what's going on in the world today, I'm assuming, Simon, looking closely at the global macro. So when we consider what's happening with the, war in Russia, Ukraine, what's happening Middle East, the concerns about what's going on with China, when we look at the monetary policies and the monetary systems, US being at risk of not being a reserve currency. I don't buy that, by the way. I'm just saying that these are the things that are being talked about, and lots of evidence is showing that China right now, for example, is selling US treasuries and getting out of the US dollar. They're buying tonnage of gold, as an example. So when you look at all of those factors, or do you look at all those factors, or do you just kind of shut out the clutter and just stay focused on what you stay focused on? Can you give me some insights into how you view the kind of global macro?
I look at what is in my control and what's not in my control. And I
Mm-hmm.
literally have a list. So to remind myself, because when I wake up tomorrow, the world will try to suck my attention into macroeconomic topics.
Right.
So right now, the world is trying to get me worried about the ETH ETF approval or not.
Mm-hmm.
Guess what? It's not in my control.
Mm-hmm.
So there's literally a list of things that is not in my control. Interest rates, approvals of crypto, market volatility. My returns are not in my control. The news are not in my control. Whatever corrupt politicians do is not in my control. Valuations is not in my control.
Mm-hmm.
What is in my control? My savings rate of this month. So that's where I focus. My research process on how I find the MSCIs and Lindes. That's signal, not noise. My holding period. Simon, don't sell the winners too early. My
Mm-hmm.
risk curve. What are defensive versus offensive players in my portfolio? Defensive, real estate, mid offensive team, stocks, and then very offensive players, Bitcoin, Solana. What is also in my control? My position sizing. So going in with smaller sizes, being more humble, knowing that I can be wrong and I will be wrong a ton of times. So better not go all in, but rather go in layers.
Bits and pieces at a time. So let me ask you this question, because I agree with what you're saying. We can only look at what is, and again, what can we control, what can't we control. Having said that, from a business perspective, an investment perspective, I'm of the mind that I need to do enough research that I create a thesis around it. So, in other words, I look at the global macro, I look and say, okay, what do I think is going to happen given the war, Russia, Ukraine, Middle East, China. I look at all those global macro. It is what it is. I can't control it, but at some point, from my perspective, and I'm happy to have you give me a different perspective, by the way, is I look at it and go, okay, based on what I'm seeing, if I want to, number one, be able to capitalize on this or be able to hedge my bet, risk mitigate, I have to have at least a thesis that I make decisions based on. That's how I view it. Given that I can't control what's happening with Russia, Ukraine, but what I can say is, based on what's going on over there, I see an inevitable outcome of X, Y, Z. Based on that, I see that I'm going to hedge or I'm going to risk mitigate by doing this. Is that how you look at it? Or do you literally just shut the clutter out and go, I got nothing to do with this. I just need to be focused on what I'm doing right now?
I look at all of these things, but I zoom out 10 years.
Okay.
So earnings calls don't matter to me. Wars don't matter because wars come and go every 10 years. There are a couple wars.
Mm-hmm.
They come and go. um, Same with inflation, deflation. Uh, I look at 10 years. In 10 years, you will have 2 or more business cycles. So you will have bear markets and bull markets.
Yep.
And in 10 years, there are secular and cyclical trends. I don't look at the cyclical ones, I look at the secular ones. For example, demographic shifts. Will global population get older or younger? This is
Mm-hmm.
one thing that I look at. Will people have more kids or less kids? Less kids, older. Those are secular trends. Now, when you go older and you understand healthcare, now you might go into specific healthcare stocks because as people getting older, they will need some stuff for their brain, some stuff for mobility. That's a secular trend. I look at that. Um, if people have less kids, will they have more companion animals, cats and dogs?
Mm-hmm.
Clear secular trend. So if you want to pick that one, then I would study companies like Zoetis, who are in the companion animal veterinary field.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful company, by the way. So that's a secular trend, and I would look at that. And then, yes, when the earnings calls of Zoetis come, sometimes I look at the earnings call just to see if my fundamental thesis is still correct, if I still can trust management, and if they still have a clue and the plan and cost control. Yes, but that's just double checking my thesis. Do I look at inflation rate? No, because that changes all the time. The
Mm-hmm.
2% is an arbitrary number. It might never go back to 2%. Never. We might get deflationary. I personally think that we will live in a deflationary world in 15 years. That's why I don't even care about inflation, because that's just a temporary thing. But
Mm-hmm.
as soon as we have high productivity, inflation will turn into deflation.
Mm-hmm.
And the
I
high
like,
productivity will come from the robots and from AI. We will have
yeah,
more working entities than people because the robots will be super productive and they will do all the boring work.
right. I like the thought process that you give, and I think it's a good one. And I'm probably not as committed to it as you are, but you do make a really good point is that when you zoom out 10 years, it changes how anything is happening in the moment. So because I follow Tesla as an example, I'm just using Tesla as an example, and I follow many, I guess, individuals who are huge fans of Tesla. They've studied it, they've been involved with it, they own the vehicles, they live, eat, breathe Tesla. You'd think they own the company. Well, they do.
I am one of these poor guys. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's so right now when you look at the drop of Tesla and whatever went down to 175 bucks or 160 bucks a share, they're going, wow, what a great opportunity. Okay, well, it just dropped 50%, and yet you're going all in. You're going even more. And they're going, yes, because I'm looking out Tesla in my portfolio. And they're doing option trades, by the way. They're leveraging, they're doing all the things that they're doing, although they're not going margin. The point is that they look at that opportunity and they're going all in, because they're looking 10 years down the road, and they're going, and in their world, they'll say, okay, for example, the problem is people think Tesla is a car company. It's not. It's a data company. It's a AI company. It's a everything but a car company, and cars are just one of those things that they happen to produce. So they look at it, and it's only to say this is, and it's much deeper than all of that. They look at it through a different lens. But to your point, they're looking 10 years into the future, and they're going, that is going to be an unbelievable company, and they're going to lead the way. So that would be one thought process as an example. And then from a
Great example.
secular,
I
what's
own
that?
Tesla since I think 12 years.
That's
Uh,
great.
I bought it at $30
Mm-hmm.
pre-split. So I can't remember how many splits we have, but at the beginning it was $30. I went in with
Mm-hmm.
exactly this thesis, and I made a video about it. I said, guys, we will have 5 S curves. Car is just the first one. It's not even the most important one. Energy, battery, robots will be the important ones. And I didn't even know there would be another one, AI and FSD.
Mm-hmm.
So we have 5 companies in one. How not to enter this? And then there is Elon, who is a fascinating person to follow. So, hey, he can do stuff. He can do rockets. He might be able to pull this off. We doubled a couple times Tesla, and those were wonderful years. Now, uh, I shaved off half twice, so at least I hedged that. But I'm still holding, right? I don't know, $40,000 of Tesla. It feels terrible, and I imagine that the next 2 years it will feel terrible, but only if I sell it. If
Mm-hmm.
I look forward 10 years, yes, there is the risk that it implodes. But what will the world look like in 10 years? Will we have more clean energy self driving cars or less?
Mm.
And you see, everything simplifies. Will we
Yes.
need energy storage or not?
Mm-hmm.
Will AI be a thing or not in 10 years? So uh, it's not easy to hold a stock, seeing it red day after day, month after month. But if the thesis is intact, you can even stomach that. And it was the same thing with Amazon, with Bitcoin, with other things where if you hold it 4 years, 10 years, you will be highly rewarded. But
Mm-hmm.
you need the confidence and the process that gives you that call.
100%. Simon, you've been very generous with your time. So great words of wisdom. As we start to wind this conversation down, when you're speaking to entrepreneurs, what are some of the things that you would want to share on this particular conversation that we haven't touched on? What are we missing in the world of Simon and some of the guidance that you give your entrepreneurs?
If you are a business owner, I would I would grab the book Strategy Sprints, and I would start doing one thing that you can grab from our website right now. It's strategysprints.com. There is a tool there called the Daily Flow. You write down, how did I allocate my time today? What will I delegate tomorrow? This is really the core, the fractal, the core habit of being an entrepreneur.
Mm,
If you master this habit of every day writing down, how did I spend my time and what's the one thing that I will delegate next, this is the core of surviving the next 10 years and of scaling a business. So you can grab it for free. It's at strategysprints.com. It's called the Daily Flow, and enjoy it. And if you want to go deeper, you can buy the book, Strategy Sprints, on Amazon. If you want to talk to us, you go to strategysprints.com, click a button, land on our calendar. Happy to talk.
fantastic. Simon, thank you so much for joining me on the Everyday Millionaire podcast. Love the conversation, and I think it's definitely going to be another conversation in the near future that we can unpack this even a little deeper. Thanks very much for your time.